Uber, 481 Flamingo Drive, Apollo Beach, Florida. Phone 813-645-1267. At his home Tuesday, March the 7th, 1989, with Helen Earley of the Oldsmobile History Center. Tape 1 of 1 tape. Oh, yes, we really would, Paul. The day you started and who you worked with, where the employment office was, why you elected GM instead of Ford or Podunk or wherever.
Well, I actually started out as an experimental driver out the proving grounds.
At Milford?
At Milford, Michigan.
What year was that?
What year was that, dearie?
1956.
Yeah.
That was the first year you hired in?
Yeah.
1956. Do you remember the month?
September. It was a durability. In other words, I was a driver testing all kinds of cars.
So you tested more than just Oldsmobiles?
Yes.
Okay.
We had a different one every day.
Okay. What did you do in the testing, Paul?
We ran certain schedules and you kept up with them, so they got 75,000 miles on them. Then they'd tear them all down and then see what wore.
Your job was to drive 75,000 miles. Was this on just the routes there on the proving ground? You continuously drove.
Right. 8 hours a day you drive Belgian block and then smooth gravel
and all
roads.
Types of roads. Okay.
Then the circular where you get up to 110 miles an hour when you weren't supposed to.
Okay.
But then I left from there.
So then, when you got 75,000 miles, what happened? You started
They take the cars and tear them apart and check all the parts for wear.
Okay.
Now
that was someone else's job?
Yeah.
Okay. How long did you drive as a test driver?
Oh, a couple of years.
Who was your supervisor? Do you remember?
Gosh, I can't think of his name.
That's
but I know
right. And when you say you were driving all kinds of cars, were you driving other makes than GM?
Yes. Nashes, Fords, Chevrolet,
Chrysler,
the whole works. They had everything there at the time, but they've quit that. They don't do that anymore.
Okay.
And I went from there to Chevrolet as a clerk.
Okay, what year was that?
Probably about 2 years later, probably 58. Yeah.
And Chevrolet was located at?
Right out the proving ground.
I see.
And I worked there for a couple of years.
Well, what did you do for Chevrolet?
Clerk.
A clerk? What did a clerk do?
Oh, kept up records on what the cars were doing.
So you were keeping records of what the cars were doing, and you, the first job, you were making the cars do their thing, and then your second job with Chevrolet, you were keeping records of that activity.
Then it got to the point where I got experimenting around. I went over to Oldsmobile and applied for a job. And I got a job as clerk at the proving grounds.
But why did you do that?
I just felt like I wanted to move.
Okay.
I mean, there's no real reason to do it, but I went right to Oldsmobile at the proving grounds. I can't remember the boss's name at the time. He was a heavy-set, real nice fella. And I was clerk out there with Sid Poland.
Okay.
And Sid has passed away by now. But after that, they were cutting down the forest at the proving ground. So I went to the plant.
To the plant?
The main plant in Lansing.
Okay.
And they put me on plant protection for 2 years. That was 78 and 79?
So you worked at the Oldsmobile Proving...
Earlier than that one.
Was it?
You worked for the Oldsmobile Proving Ground from 1958 to when?
Probably 4 years, huh?
About 4 years.
62.
So that'd be 1962.
Yeah.
About when the F-85 came out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had one of those too. Little red station wagon.
Let me ask you, while you were at the Proving Ground, you were keeping records. What kind of records? Can you be specific?
Well, how many miles you went on a certain car and what broke down.
You mean how many miles per gallon you got?
Yeah, miles per gallon and how many miles it got on certain parts and what you had to replace at a certain time.
Okay.
All records like that. And then I went to Lansing, as I said, which must have been, what, 62, 63?
Okay.
And I worked as a clerk. Then they got...
Where did you work as a clerk?
Where did I start out with? Did I start out with sheet metal? Dairy?
Seems like you were a clerk out at the proving grounds first.
Yeah, I was. I already had that, but then we went to Lansing.
But what did you do when you first got to Lansing?
Oh, that was the
That's when I went to plant protection. wasn't
yeah,
it?
plant protection.
Yeah.
Who was the plant protection manager then, or director?
Gosh.
Who
What
did
was
you
her name?
report to then?
I
What was your
can't-
boss's name?
You got me on names as far as that goes, you know.
Okay,
I was on plant protection for 2 years.
what did you do on plant protection?
We sat at the gate and watched to make sure they didn't steal things from the
Which
plant.
gate? Any gate?
Any gate. You
You
fluctuated around.
I see.
Then on weekends
You
you
went-
went trips. You
What do
walked
you
all
mean?
over.
Oh,
You walked all over the plant. I don't think there's a spot in that Oldsmobile plant that I haven't seen.
was this only at plant one, or did you have other?
Plant one, and then we did get transferred maybe for a month over to jet plant.
Plant three,
Yeah,
okay.
but we rotated to give somebody a different
Uh-huh.
track
What are
thing.
some of the men you worked with on plant protection? Do you remember some names?
I can remember their faces, but names.
Did you work with Sammy McFarland?
Yeah,
Okay. What kind of a guy was he to work with?
very nice guy. He was a darn nice fella. He got along with you good. And,
Lieutenant Hadley, did you work with him?
yeah,
Okay.
and then there was another one that was Kennedy, Sergeant Kennedy.
Okay. You worked with him? What
Yeah,
kind of a guy was he to work?
tough.
What do you mean by that?
Well, one day I came in from walking the beat, and I'd just going down in there, so I lit a cigarette. And he came out and he said, "What are you doing with a cigarette in your mouth?" Of course, I smoked regular then. And I said, "I don't know why, I just lit up a cigarette." He said, "You aren't supposed to light a cigarette out here." Just going into the office, you know. Yeah. All through my duty, you know, gonna change clothes and go home. Yeah. And he was mean.
Well, people are different, aren't they?
He says, "Gosh, I'm ashamed of you." He says, "I had high hopes for you."
Paul, do you remember any unusual incidents when you were walking the beat or plant protection?
Yes, I know one time we heard somebody moaning, and
Where was this?
in the main plant where we must have been final assembly. They had pits down there.
Where was final assembly then? What was that building number?
78. It was in building 78.
Okay.
It's way down there where the product delivery is.
Right.
Anyway, come to find out, we located the man. There were 2 or 3 of us looking, but he had fallen into the pit and broke his leg, so
Falling
they got
into
him
what
out.
pit?
The pit where people put the parts underneath the cars, you know,
Oh,
in the final assembly line.
well, the line had stopped.
Yeah, well, everybody had stopped.
Yes.
It was after the ship
How would
had
he
gone
fall
home.
into that?
Well, if it wasn't bright enough, he could walk right into one of those things because there's just a little curve in front of him. But we found him. He had a broken leg. They took him away.
Uh-huh.
And,
Was this on a weekend?
yeah. Yep. But,
How, was he a worker there? Was he supposed to be working on the weekend?
yeah. I think he was probably somebody that's supposed to be checking on things in the plant to make sure they're ready for the next
Like a
weekend to start.
maintenance person?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they got him out and got him all right. But
Do you remember any other unusual incidents?
I know we had to take a lot of tests, and we also had to take first aid, which I have forgotten all about by now. But I still got my badges yet, too.
That's fine. Well, why not? You won them.
But number 149, that was my badge number. I can still remember that. But after that, I went to experimental sheet metal.
How did you happen to do that?
Well, they needed another clerk again, so they found out I had been a clerk before, and I'd been to the proving grounds for
Okay.
Oldsmobile.
Experimental sheet metal.
Experimental sheet
what
metal.
What year was that?
68, I would think.
Yeah, right around 68, I guess.
Okay, who was your supervisor in experimental sheet metal?
Elliot, believe it or not.
Oh, Max Elliott?
Max Elliott.
Okay, and where was experimental sheet metal located?
Right behind assembly on building 62. Which, no, 62 is the main part, and 64 is where the experimental part was.
Okay.
You go across that ramp, you know.
Right.
But Max Elliott was my general foreman.
Uh-huh. Who's the superintendent, do you remember?
Yeah, Phil Deemer.
Okay. What kind of a man was he to work with?
I liked Phil. He was very good. Real nice man.
And then Phil would report to
The big shots above him.
the chief engineer.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember who was chief engineer at that time?
Nobody went up higher, too, I
Is that
guess.
John Belts? Howard Carroll?
Carroll, I think. Yeah. I know John Belts, too.
Harold Metzel?
Might have been. I don't know. I can't
Okay,
remember names.
that's
But I see Schattenberg is over here in St. Pete, too, huh?
Yes, I interviewed him.
I knew him. He was an engineer.
He was, okay. What kind of a man was he to work with?
I didn't really work with him. See, I'd go across and run Xerox or pick up parts or things like that because I was timekeeper for sheet metal and wood model shop.
Okay, now timekeeper, what did they do and how did you do it? Did you have any mechanical device for
No,
keeping
you just
time?
checked on each time card.
So these were handwritten time
Yeah.
cards or were these cards that came out of
Cards
the,
had come out of the machine,
the
but they were,
machine.
yeah. But we'd
But-
go check and make sure they were on time.
So it
and
was
all
all manual to pick off the
Yeah.
information and make your manual handwritten report.
that. Right, and then you had sheets to make out to show how many hours you put in and all that stuff.
Okay.
But I did it for both departments.
For both the experimental engineering
Experimental
and
sheet
the
metal.
sheet metal.
Experimental sheet metal and wood model shop.
Wood model shop. Okay, what did they do in experimental sheet metal? Do you remember?
Well, we made parts, experimental parts they would put on cars to test before cars were issued these parts, you know. They
Okay, what kind of
test them.
parts?
Well, they rebuilt a whole car, made a whole big van out of it one time, and then they scrapped that, I guess.
Do you remember what year that was?
Ugh. I know they said they killed the thing because
Was
they
it,
weren't going to use it anymore.
was it before the tornado, before 66?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right around 66, 65, 66, yeah.
Okay.
But,
They'd made a van and
yeah,
this was kind of a hand-built thing, wasn't it?
yeah. They cut the floor out and made a new floor on it, make it lower so you could stand up in it.
Oh, that
It was quite a thing. It was quite a thing, yeah. But they didn't go on with it. They just dropped it. I don't know why, but
But experimental sheet metal did a lot of other things too.
oh yeah, made all kinds of parts like old fenders and side panels and hoods. Yeah, there's welding and everything in that department. But
Well, Paul, then to make a part, you had to have someone provide the drawings.
yeah, and that was done by across the building at 62, 66. Is it 66?
66 is the new engineering building. 64 was the old.
Across the way, 64.
So when you got these parts, then what was this drawing? What was the next step?
Well, they would make the part and
Your area
try it and
would
test
make
it. Yeah.
the part.
And then it'd go on one of these
And how
proving
would you
ground
test
cars.
the part?
It would go on one of the proving ground cars that drove from Lansing out to the proving ground.
I see.
back.
Okay.
I knew a lot of those drivers too because of being at the proving grounds.
Do you remember some names of drivers?
So long ago, you know.
Oh, I know it. Names do leave a person.
Eccles was one. I'm trying to think of that. John Wolf was one too.
Okay.
And there's one little runt he was the chief of them all. I can't even think of his name now.
How was he to work for?
Very good. He's a nice kid. I didn't really work for him. I worked for the boss out there at the time.
And who was that
Who was
boss?
a heavy-set man. Do you remember his name, dearie?
I
proving
can
it.
see him, but I can't tell you his name.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
A heavy-set little man, but he's awful nice. Good to work for.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, all my days with Oldsmobile were good. I liked it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got the time of the wood model shop too. What did the wood model shop do?
Wood model shop would make parts that were for experimental, but they would be made out of wood. Measure them right down to degree and make exactly the same thing in wood.
Okay.
And they also made that plaque I had there too.
Yes, yes. Well, then after they'd made the parts in wood, what was the next step?
They would make them out of metal.
Metal,
Yeah. But these were detailed right down to the middle-inch degree.
So what the experimental sheet metal did was the second step
Yeah.
from the drawing,
Right,
because the wood model shop was in between. I
right.
see.
Drawing, then the wood model, and the model over to metal.
Okay.
Then they'd go to assembly, and they'd assemble all the parts, and from then on, they'd go on experimental cars, and they would test them.
How far were you? Were 2-3 model years ahead, perhaps?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also had to drive every day from Howell to Lansing, 42 miles one way every day, which I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I like to drive anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you, who was the head of the wood model shop at that time?
I can remember him too. We went to a lot of parties. Do you remember him, Derry?
No.
Who was the head of sheet metal was Phil Deemer, you said?
No, yeah. He's engineering, all of engineering sheet metal, not just sheet metal.
Well, who headed up the sheet metal then?
Well, my general manager was Elliott, Max Elliott.
Okay, so
Then after him was John Currigan.
John
Currigan.
Currigan.
He's in that picture somewhere.
Okay. All right.
But he just retired. And they also had Bob Dietz, he was a foreman, and Harold Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that other
Wilson.
Wilson, Ray Wilson.
Okay.
Ray? Yeah, Ray.
Did you have women working in the sheet metal
Yes,
experimental?
they had one at the time.
Okay, do you
She
remember
was-
her name?
She was going to be a welder. She's also left that and went with that paper that comes out every time. I can't think of her name. She's with this paper that comes out from Oldsmobile, along with Robert Hetzel.
You mean Mary Jo Young?
No,
Oh.
the one that's right with Robert Hetzel in there. Hazel, Bob Hazel. Bob Hazel was from sheet metal. And this gal was a experimental welder. Then she went with this big paper they put out, but I can't think of her name. Well, you sure lose names when you don't think of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that happens to all of us.
Yeah.
How many people were in experimental sheet metal?
There was a heck of a slew of them. Well, probably 25, 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
They all had special jobs to do.
Okay.
They even had a welding booth.
Okay, now, what were some of the parts that would be welded?
Oh, parts of the fender were put together, I imagine, and trying to think of what all it was. I know they made a lot of different parts, but I was stuck in the office most of the time. I did wander around once in a while, but because I knew a lot of them too, as friends there.
Mm-hmm.
Hazel and Dietz used to be out on the floor, but he came in as foreman before I left.
What were working conditions in experimental sheet metal?
I thought I enjoyed them very muchly, except for just one fella. When these younger foremen come in, and he actually didn't have it over me because I would report to the general foreman, not to the foreman. Foreman couldn't tell me what to do or when to do it. Of course, every morning I came in, he'd tell me just where to go. I'd tell him the same thing back, but it made such a lovely day to start that way. But he has retired also. I won't say his name, Hugh.
And I won't ask you. Who was your best foreman?
John Kerrigan. He's very nice. There's only one time that I felt as though I got kind of let out because I had retired already and I went back to visit. And I went in the engineering part, which was building 62, I think, at that time.
Okay.
And they told me to wait there and they would call the foreman and tell him I'm here. Well, John Kerrigan came down and talked to me down there, but he didn't lead me up so I could see the rest of the guys.
Oh.
I was kind of disgusted at that because I wanted to see him, you know.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I talked with him a minute, and then from then on I never attempted to go back to see him because if I get cut out and not even supposed to go in there, why should I?
Yeah. How long was that after you retired?
Only a couple of years.
Oh, yes. And you retired in 1980, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
October of 80.
You remember what your starting salary was when you were hired in at the proving ground?
No, but it was pretty good as far as I know. Even the drivers made darn good money on these experimental drivers.
You just don't have any ballpark figure that
No.
to make a comparison with now. Okay.
I saved all those papers at one time, but I think by now I've lost them. But when I was with experimental sheet metal, we put in an awful lot of overtime, which to me was very handy because of 6 kids, you needed overtime. Of course, I didn't see the family too much, but driving 42 miles one way and then working overtime, Saturdays and Sundays. But I enjoyed my work there. But when they said, would you retire if they brought it down to 55, I said, yeah. I was 55 at the time, and I had just gone through being an executor of my dad's estate. See, he had died, and he never had a will. So I had to go through ledger books that he would write down. He'd go uptown and buy a bottle of Lavoris, and he'd write it down. I had to go through all those books and straighten out everything. My sister's husband was a judge, and he helped me with it. But I tell you, that's so nerve-wracking then to find out somebody in the family owed some money, and he said, well, no, I don't owe that. Dad's gone. I don't have to pay that back. He wasn't even going to put it back in the estate. We let him get away with it, but we haven't been happy with him since.
No.
It seems though almost every family has that same situation, where somebody gets right off the beaten path.
Paul, in your years of working at Olds, do you remember any unusual circumstances or any comical things that happened or any labor relations problems or any work
No.
stoppages?
I got along good with everybody as far as I knew, except for that one foreman. But I'd just erase it every morning when he came in. I knew he was going to say something like that, so I just repeat it right back to him. But that was the only irritation part of it that was in the whole business, period.
No, you were a salaried person.
Yeah.
Did you supervise hourly people?
Nope. I was as high as I could go with clerks. And I don't know what they called it, senior specialized clerk or something like that when I left. But I was as high as I could go, and I was happy with it because I never went to college. Uncle Sam had me, see. And I didn't go when I got out either because shortly after I got out I met her, and then I met her practically the day I got out on Thanksgiving. Got engaged at Christmas and married by the time she was 19 because she couldn't get married before 19. So in July of the next year I got married. I didn't even know her a whole year yet. Now we got almost 43 years in.
My gracious.
So it worked out all right.
Made a good decision. Yes. Well, do you remember any buildings being built while you were there that you had anything to do with? Or?
No, but I know I covered the whole plant, even the roofs and every place. With plant protection, when you have a free shift, they have what you call a roving shift. You can go wherever you want to and just report in every once in a while. Stop at a phone every hour so they know where you are.
I see.
And then if there's something happens, well, they can call you and get a hold of you, see. But, one thing that did happen when I was out at the proving grounds, I got a call from home. And evidently I was out of the building when I got it, and then Deemer came in and talked to me. He says, there's a car out there with racing tires on it. He says, you get it and go to Ann Arbor. Your daughter just been burned by coffee.
Oh, my land.
But I did. I got over there, and here she was, and she was over there quite a while. How long was she in there, dear?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, and we had to put white robes on, and but well, she was in this walker, got underneath the table and yanked on the cord, and they had these great big coffee pots at the time, and it was plugged in, but the grounds were out of it. Right on top, right here. From that time on, she never let anybody see what it did or anything. I don't know if you even saw it, did you, dearie?
Well,
It disfigured her.
yeah, I saw it until she was about 6 years old.
Every time she went swimming, she'd wear a t-shirt. But that must have been terrible.
Well, Phil Deemer understood.
I didn't take long getting there either.
No. Well, when you were on plant protection, then were there any major emergencies, or do you remember any of those?
Oh, I know some came in, but there was other people that took care of them. You know, that had been there longer with medical things. They'd jump in the ambulance and go with them over to.
What kind of emergencies would plant
Well, like
security
this
have to
guy.
step into?
Well, like this guy that fell in the pit
Right.
with a broken leg, or if somebody got cut, or a grinder caught on their hand or
Do you
something.
remember any of those specifically?
No, I didn't seem to have them on my shift when I was there. And we rotated shifts. I know one man in that. Oh, another man I knew was Toth in that place too. But Toth, T-O-T-H.
Okay.
He was a good friend of mine when I was on plant protection. And McFarland.
Harold McFarland?
Yeah, I think that was his name.
Sammy McFarland.
Sam, that's Sam.
Yeah, right.
And now you say Sam, it does ring a bell. But they were darn good eggs. Everyone on there was darn good. Awful good.
Did you ever see any brass, any of the higher-ups in the plant when you were there?
I have an instance that you won't believe.
Okay.
I was on the gate in the engineering garage.
Was that 64 or 66?
66.
Okay.
It was 62. 66, I think it was.
The new engineering building.
Yeah. Well, when you come from plant protection down, it would be on the left-hand side.
Right. That's just
Okay.
66.
Anyway, I was on duty right in the garage there. These engineers would drive in and park the car and then go in. Of course, they'd have to show their badge to me every time they went by. Well, one guy came up one time, he didn't pull out his badge. I said, whoa! I said, I gotta see your badge. I don't have to show you my badge. I said, yes, you do. I said, that's my job right here. Come to find out, it was Wolfram. But he commended me for being on the ball.
That's interesting.
I thought I recognized him, but I found out later
Good for you, for sticking to your guns.
But he commented that was very good of me to stop him like that.
Now, was he general manager then?
Yeah, he was general manager at the time.
Okay.
So I had a...
Do you remember any other higher-ups coming in, or any incidents?
Well, I used to see a lot of the higher-ups, period, because engineering meetings, we'd have them in there, too. But they had these meetings over in a room in 66, you know. And you get to meet a few of them then. But,
Do you remember John Belts?
yeah, John Belts. Yeah, he was just new at it when I first got there. But young kid. Of course, he's older now, just like I am. But,
He's gone now.
is he? He died?
He had cancer.
Oh, for Pete's sakes. Shush.
Now, Phil Deemer would report to the chief engineer,
Yeah,
wouldn't he?
right.
Okay.
Is Phil still around?
Yes,
He's in
yes.
Lansing, huh?
Yes.
He never moved out of Lansing.
Not that I know of. Well, Paul, you've got some interesting memories. Can you think of anything else you'd like to put on our little tape?
No, I think that just about covered the whole thing. But I covered a lot of the, well, I covered every building when I was on plant protection. Every spot you can think of, basements and ceiling roofs.
Most of that was walking then,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then you would punch the clock.
Right.
Okay.
But then when you had a free day, well, you'd walk wherever you wanted to
Okay.
and look and then report in about every hour. You had to write down little discrepancies such as a leaking hose, air hose, or something you thought was wrong. You'd put it on your sheet and then they'd check it out.
Do you remember any real emergencies that came up while you were on your beat?
No, I know that they'd have the ambulance and then somebody'd be going out when I come in off the beat. Somebody'd be going out with the ambulance.
Well, I have retired, but as I was telling Betty, Jim Walkinshaw and I formed Early Enterprises and sold our service back to Oldsmobile to set up and manage their history files. That's what this is, the Oldsmobile History Center. And we're setting the files up. The factory's given us a computer. And we handle history questions, restoration questions, writers, researchers, historians, that type of thing.
Yeah.
It's part of the Oldsmobile History Center is this oral history program. So that's why we appreciate your wanting to share some of your memories with us for this effort.
Was this where you?
Yes, that's our physical location. It's over by the airport in Lansing. And if you're in Lansing, we'd love to have you and Betty stop in and say hello to us and see our setup.
Would I see some gal over there in a new part, which wasn't there when I was working, but to get all my insurance papers, I got a dozen of them to bring back with me.
Okay.
And she gave me numbers to call, 800 numbers in case I had a problem, which I've used quite regular. Mess, gosh, I can't think of her name, but she's awful nice. She explained everything to me. Very nice to me when I went in there.
You probably went to the Human Resources Center
That
on
might be it.
Waverly and St. Joe.
Yeah.
Yes, they do have some very efficient, helpful people
This
there.
gal helped me an awful lot and gave me all these forms. They're dentist forms and the Blue Cross forms.
Oh, good.
And I would write to her or call her to ask information about different medical, because it's so darn different down here. She advised me to stay with Michigan Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Okay.
There's also a Florida Blue Cross Blue Shield. But she said it'd be better if you stayed with Michigan one. But the problem is, like I was going to that doctor and paying out every time you went in. Any one of these doctors down here, you have to pay them a check right away the day you have the service done. And that gets pretty expensive. So finally I had to get that done. But it's so long for it to get from here to Lansing, then back again. We had one not too long ago. We called up about it, and they had she went through one of these machines where it's just like a x-ray of your whole body. I forget what they call it. But she had a date to have it done, the 22nd of September, I think it was. But